You know what they say, Diane mused as we pored over the surveillance stills of Marcella and Mr. Woodrow in decidedly compromising situations. Mistresses always tell their married lovers that they'd never actually leave their spouse. For a woman like Mrs. Woodrow, learning her husband's side piece has been playing the same brazen game with other wealthy marks. Well, that might just push her over the edge. My eyes gleamed with vengeful anticipation. Marcella would get her sanctimonious, holier-than-thou attitude forcibly readjusted once we went public with her rampant infidelities. If she thought she could sully the sanctity of marriage for her own devious ends, it was time her world came crashing down around her, too. And Rowan? Well, when footage emerged of his beloved fiancée cavorting with other wealthy paramours behind his back, any glimmer of sympathy would shrivel within him, the ultimate insult for a man who had risked everything to leave his family behind for her hollow promises of love. They were the perfect marks, both of them consumed with avarice, arrogance, and lust, now mere lambs awaiting the slaughter I was meticulously preparing. By the time I was done, not even the ashes of their bloated egos would remain. After weeks of quietly compiling the damning receipts, photos, and call records, everything was finally in place for my grand counterstrike. I could scarcely contain my eagerness as I dialed the number for Diane's direct line. "It's time," I said, my voice dripping with finality. "Let's burn this whole sordid facade to the ground." The annual Westbridge Charity Gala was the perfect stage for my grand vengeance, a swanky, high-profile event frequented by the city's elite upper crust, including Rowan and his precious Marcella, who would no doubt be reveling in their freshly minted reputations as a glamorous power couple rising from the ashes of my failed marriage. Little did those two arrogant fools suspect that their entire sham of a relationship was about to detonate in front of all their well-heeled peers. No amount of public niceties or honeyed lies would insulate them from the reckoning I had meticulously orchestrated. When Diane and I arrived at the lavish Westbridge Hotel ballroom, our eyes scanned the glittering crowd for our intended targets. Sure enough, there was Marcella, draped over Rowan like a sleek, overpriced trophy, her skin-tight scarlet dress leaving almost nothing to the imagination. "Eyes on the prize," Diane muttered in my ear, as I felt a pang of disgust and pity for the man I once loved. It's showtime. Our preparation had been perfect. While mingling among the city's elite under the guise of donor solicitations, I slipped to Diane's assistant the incendiary photos and videos we had compiled of Marcella's rampant infidelities. Our evidence bombshell was ready to detonate. Within minutes, the first whispers began rippling through the crowd like wildfire. All around us, guests gasped and pointed iPhones as the undercover salacious shots of Marcella cavorting with her elderly tycoon lover went viral. Someone must have recognized the infamous Christopher Woodrow. The cheating scandal quickly took on a life of its own, spreading like a plume of radioactive gossip. Diane and I feigned innocence as partygoers gaped in scandalized rapture. I saw the glaringly public relationship of the two men, body and heart, but from the corner of my eye I glimpsed Marcella's face draining of color before her gaze met mine across the ballroom, her painted lips contorted in rage, finally connecting the dots of who was responsible for her spectacular public unraveling. Bingo! Just then, a sleek ivory shoe appeared at the edge of my vision. I followed the impossibly toned leg attached to it all the way up to the stunningly furious face of Miranda Woodrow, Christopher's scorned, ultra-affluent wife. "You cosseted little whore," she snarled, spit flying as she seized Marcella by her expensively coiffed hair. "Did you really think you could keep making a fool of me behind my back?" All around us, guests gasped and pointed iPhones as the undercover salacious shots of Marcella cavorting with her elderly tycoon lover went viral. Someone must have recognized the infamous Christopher Woodrow. The cheating scandal quickly took on a life of its own, spreading like a plume of radioactive gossip. Diane and I feigned, but from the corner of my eye, I glimpsed Marcella's face, draining of color before her gaze met mine across the ballroom, her painted lips contorted in rage, finally connecting the dots of who was responsible for her spectacular public unraveling. Bingo! Just then, a sleek ivory shoe appeared at the edge of my vision. I followed the impossibly toned leg attached to it all the way up to the stunningly furious face of Miranda Woodrow, Christopher's scorned, ultra-fluent wife. "You cosseted little whore," she snarled, spit flying as she seized Marcel by her expensively coiffed hair. "Did you really think you could keep making a fool of me behind my back?" Our eyes met across the crowd of aghast guests, and in that moment I allowed the full force of my vindication to blaze across my expression. "You did this to yourself," I mouthed the words for his benefit, letting their implication linger like the pungent aroma of schadenfreude wafting through the air. His jaw clenched as he gave the briefest of nods, a reluctant admission that I had indeed exacted the ultimate retribution from my former life. With that, he turned and stalked away from the gala, through a quickly forming void in the crowd, leaving utter debasement and ruin in his wake. I sipped my champagne, allowing the delicious moment to linger on my tongue as Diane materialized at my side. "Well, Mrs. Davies," she murmured with a proud smile, "I do believe this evening has been a full and resounding success, don't you?" A savage grin stretched across my face as I surveyed the catastrophic scene my vengeance had wrought. "You don't know the half of it," I replied, "but I have a feeling this is just the beginning of something beautiful." In the aftermath of the Westbridge Gala calamity, Rowan did what any disgraced, recently humbled man would do. He came slinking back with his tail between his legs, begging for mercy. I'll admit, seeing him reduced to a shell of his formerly arrogant self provided a wicked sort of satisfaction. Gone was the cocksure bravado, the unearned superiority and callous indifference to my pain. Now, sitting across the table from me in Diane's office, he looked more like a kick stray than my husband of 6 years. "Alara," he croaked as I eyed him with unconcealed disdain. I don't know what to say. What happened with Marcella, God, I was such a fool." I said nothing, letting the silence fester until he visibly squirmed under my pitiless glare. "I know I can never take back all the hurt I caused you," he continued, shamefaced, "but I'm begging you, from the bottom of my heart, please, give me one more chance. Let me make things right between us." A harsh bark of laughter escaped my lips before I could stop it. "Make things right?" I echoed incredulously. "Rowan, you cheated on me repeatedly with multiple women over the course of our marriage. You funneled money, you lied, you manipulated me at every turn. What on earth makes you think you deserve a second chance at anything from me?" His eyes went wide, realizing the magnitude of his transgressions for perhaps the first time. I was destroyed when I saw you with Marcella," he stammered. "She was just using me, like some pathetic meal ticket to bankroll her lifestyle. When that footage got out, I realized how blind I'd been, how terribly I failed you as a husband by letting my lust spiral so completely out of control." I regarded him stonily, refusing to let his carefully rehearsed pangs of remorse disarm me. Not after watching him callously tear my life asunder in pursuit of temporary pleasures. "Do you have any idea how it felt?" I asked, my voice low and menacing. "To have the man I loved, the man I built a life and future with, not only betray me, but humiliate me in the vilest way possible, over and over again. To learn that you had cast me aside, like some meaningless burden in favor of chasing disgusting trysts with interchangeable whores?" Rowan visibly wilted as the weight of his sins settled over him in palpable waves. I could see the self-loathing and regret contorting his features into a pathetic mask of shame. Good. He was finally getting a taste of the anguish he had so blithely inflicted upon me. "I was a monster," he said hoarsely. "A selfish, vile monster who didn't deserve an ounce of your unconditional love. I don't expect your forgiveness, Alara. I just hope I can make amends somehow. Even if it takes giving you every last penny I have, anything to stop being this despicable person I became." Revulsion churned in my gut as his sniveling pleas washed over me. As much as I longed to revel in his suffering, the thought of indulging his desire for penance turned my stomach. I was no longer the malleable, naive woman he married. I would never allow him to manipulate me through feigned contrition, ever again. Rising to my feet, I looked him dead in the eye and saw the faint glimmer of hope that I might offer him the absolution he suddenly craved. That glimmer was immediately extinguished by my next words. "I don't want your money, Rowan. I want your absence from my life." He flinched as if struck, his hangdog expression melting into one of naked shock. You mean—" "Don't play dumb," I snapped, resisting the urge to slap that look off his traitorous face. "After everything you've done, every line you blithely crossed with your tawdry indiscretions, do you really think I would be naive enough to let you wriggle back into my life? But Alara, But nothing," I seethed, leaning across the table until I was mere inches from his pathetic countenance. "If you agree to these terms right here, right now, I'll ensure this divorce is over swiftly and you can slink off into whatever debauched second act you have planned. But you will never, and I mean never, ask for my forgiveness or understanding. Do you hear me? You lost that right the second you started using our marriage vows as toilet paper." Rowan could only gape soundlessly, seemingly grasping for words that wouldn't come. Diane placed the paperwork on the table between us, offering a phantom of a nod. "Your choice, Mr. Davies," she intoned, the rows of tiny fonts suddenly looming larger than. "You can either dig your heels in further, or accept these very generous terms and grant Mrs. Davies the peace of mind she deserves to move on once and for all." The silence stretched out like an eternity as I watched the kaleidoscope of emotion flicker across his face. Indignation, shame, bitter acceptance. Finally, with a grunt of resignation, he snatched up the pen and scrawled his name across the dotted line, cementing our divorce into inevitability. Our eyes met one final time, and I allowed the ghost of a triumphant smile to crease my lips at his chastened expression. "You'll never hear from me again after this," he said through gritted teeth, "but I hope you find the peace you're looking for, Alara. You deserve far better than the depraved bastard I became." With that parting remark, he turned and strode out of the office, the leaden weight of his failure dogging each dejected step. I watched until his retreating back disappeared down the hallway, releasing a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. It was finally over. The man who once meant everything to me was now expunged from my life like a cancer. I could at long last close that sordid book and prepare to move forward into my new reality, one of my own creation, shaped by the venom of his actions. Diane placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder, her customary shark-like grin softening at the edges. "You did it," she murmured. "You reclaimed your power and dignity." "I've never seen a woman rise from the ashes like you have," I returned her smile, the promise of untold possibilities glimmering on the horizon. "This was only the beginning," I said resolutely. "My rebirth starts now." 6 months after Rowan's bitter departure from my life, the ink was finally dry on our divorce settlement. Thanks to Diane's tenacious legal wrangling, I emerged from the ashes of my shattered marriage with the lion's share of our formerly shared assets, including the deed to our family home, where I could begin anew. As part of the agreement, Rowan was legally prohibited from attempting to contact me. Not that he would have anyway, the last I'd heard through the grapevine. He had slunk off to lick his wounds from the scandal, living in quiet shame after our explosive downfall shredded his reputation. I couldn't say I derived any joy from seeing him laid so low. My focus was solely on myself now, on embracing the new chapter stretching out before me. Still, there was a certain cathartic release in knowing the man who tried to destroy me had been rendered just as devastated. The papers had certainly enjoyed dissecting every lurid angle of our divorce saga. The headlines blared about the scorned wife who outlasted her cheating husband, and the rise of a new divorcee warrior queen. While slightly crass, I couldn't deny the grim amusement I felt at being rebranded a folk hero by divorcees vicariously living through my vengeance. It was a strange feeling, but not entirely unwelcome after the trauma Rowan had inflicted. I refused to wallow in victimhood. My new life would be one of strength, resilience, and creating something positive from the ashes he left in his wake, which was why, nearly 3 months after the official divorce was finalized, I hosted an intimate gala of my own in the ballroom of Westbridge Hotel, the site of Marcella's ultimate downfall all those months ago. Around me, the city's elite and affluent mingled amidst towering centerpieces of fresh roses, while a string quartet provided refined ambience. Only this time, there would be no sordid scandals or uncovered affairs to upstage my event. No, this gathering was the inaugural fundraiser for my namesake foundation, Alara's Light, devoted to supporting women who had survived the betrayal of infidelity and emerged stronger for their resilience. My speech that night drew thunderous applause from the well-heeled crowd as I outlined the organization's mission to provide counseling, legal aid, and financial assistance to struggling divorcees in need. And a portion of the millions I had secured from Rowan would seed my foundation's crucial early days. No woman should ever feel helpless in the wake of a spouse's betrayal, I proclaimed from the podium, scanning the rapt audience with rejuvenated poise. With compassion and community, we can help uplift lives from the devastation and allow them to flourish anew, just as I was empowered to do in my own journey. After the remarks concluded, a line quickly formed of well-wishers and prospective donors, eager to pledge support to my cause. I greeted each one with a warm smile, my heart swelling with pride and purpose. Who could have fathomed that this dignified, self-assured woman holding court over a throng of admirers was the same broken soul, lying shattered on her kitchen floor only a year ago? The transformation was nothing short of a miracle, a raw testament to the power of cunning, resolve, and the merciless pursuit of justice. I was so invigorated by the night's success that I barely registered the presence of a newcomer waiting patiently at the back of the well-wisher line. He was a trim, handsome man in his early 40s with striking hazel eyes that gleamed with an unmistakable hint of admiration. "Mrs. Davies," he said warmly as his turn arrived, his voice carrying the faintest lilt of a British accent. "I must commend you on such a worthy and impactful mission. Your story of overcoming such unthinkable heartbreak is nothing short of inspiring." I arched an eyebrow, intrigued despite myself by his effusive praise and polished demeanor. Up close, I could make out the slim-fitted tuxedo and coiffed sandy hair that definitely belonged to a man of considerable means. "You're too kind, Mr. Douglas," he supplied with a roguish smile. "Nigel Douglas. A good friend of Christopher Woodrow's, actually, though I suspect we travel in rather different circles these days after his personal unpleasantness." My lips twitched in amusement at his deft understatement. Of course, the humiliating affair between Marcella and Christopher Woodrow had irreparably nuked the tycoon's marriage and reputation. Nigel was no doubt alluding to having cut ties with the disgraced mogul in the aftermath. "I'm a journalist by trade," he went on, seemingly emboldened by my bemused expression, "though my true passion has always been amplifying stories just like yours, of courage, perseverance, and the remarkable resilience of the indomitable human spirit." My heart fluttered as our gazes remained locked, a tantalizing electric charge seeming to crackle between us. Nigel Douglas was certainly a man who carried himself with effortless charm, the kind that made heads turn in a room full of socialites, and I'd be lying if I said his striking features weren't a refreshing sight after years of monotony. "Well, Mr. Douglas," I began, extending my hand with a coy smile dancing on my lips, "if the spirit truly does move you, perhaps you'd allow me to share a more intimate account of my trials? Over a drink, sometime soon?" His grip was firm, warm, and confident, lingering just a moment longer than it needed to, as if silently promising something more. "Mrs. Davies," he replied, his voice smooth as velvet, "I would be utterly delighted, more than you could possibly imagine." As he turned and disappeared into the glittering sea of Westbridge's most glamorous socialites, a spark ignited within me, one I hadn't felt in years. It was a thrilling rush, a giddy sense of excitement that whispered of new possibilities, of a life unburdened by the shadows of betrayal and pain. For a moment, the haunting weight of Rowan's treachery felt distant, like a chapter I had finally closed for good. Rowan's betrayal had nearly destroyed me, but I had taken that devastation and, with sheer willpower, forged it into my greatest triumph. The crushing despair that once defined me was gone, replaced by a fierce determination to reclaim my life on my own terms. This night, bathed in the glow of Westbridge's dazzling chandeliers, marked the beginning of my renaissance. I was no longer the broken woman I once was. I was a phoenix, reborn from the ashes of my past, ready to claim the future I deserved. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to subscribe to the SoraBook channel for more captivating tales in our upcoming videos. Don't miss out on the adventures and twists waiting to unfold.